Hey, Rob, thanks for coming on. This will be your first appearance on a Gary economic update. And the reason I wanted to bring you in, you live in a different part of the country. You're a different age group than me, and you have a little different background. You've been an entrepreneur. I've been doing real estate for 25 years. I am not a billionaire because I don't screw people and tell people false things and then make them buy property that's worthless. That's how those guys get rich. Or they get it pennies on the dollar from screwing someone else. But I want to talk about, because you recently bought a house, and I've told people for the last year, do not buy a house. Don't do it. Let this thing cycle out and go through. But you did it for different reasons. And I tell people, though, at the same time, that there's always deals, no matter what the housing market, real estate market's doing. There's deals out there. They're just harder to find. And it depends what you're doing. So take it with a bit of a grain of salt. Explain the difference of why you bought now and how you were able to avoid the interest hike.
Yeah. So I bought a house based on geographic location. I'd sold a house 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, had been renting a house, had a great relationship with my landlord. We were what you would call probably the perfect tenants in the sense of, and he said this, he said, you guys aren't doing drugs. You always pay on time. You often pay in cash. As soon as something breaks in the apartment, I'm immediately notified. And literally the guy who owns my house lives right around the corner from me. And he owns several properties in the town that I live in. So one of the deals when my first year's lease was up with him, at the time, what I rented this house for seemed a little expensive. That was before COVID. And immediately after COVID took place, it went from being a little bit pricey to a hell of a deal. And so part of the deal he made with me when my year's lease was up is he did not raise my rate, primarily because Indiana, like many other states in this country, and in fact, I think the entire country, had a moratorium on kicking people out of the property. So landlords were pretty much held completely, they had no defense. If somebody just didn't want to pay their rent, there was a period where you could not kick them out. So having somebody who paid on time, paid in cash, kept the place up, and if something broke, was of huge value to them. So I had a great deal. I bought my house. So I'd been looking the entire 2 years, though, for a house. And everywhere I would go, the prices were astronomical. But the friend that I had who was helping me look at houses said, well, but you got to factor in the interest rate. And my thing on that, though, was if I can never sell the house for what I'm paying for it, the interest rate doesn't much matter, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have a giant debt issuance once the house comes to sell. There was one house we looked at that we really liked. It was pricey, but because of interest rates, we thought, well, maybe it would work. And then when we started talking to the person showing the home, they said, okay, this is the price of the house. Anticipate $25,000 cash on hand at closing above whatever you pay for the house. And so wait, what? And this is not, we're not talking like a $500,000 home. We're talking about a $225,000 home. So you're talking what, an eighth of the price on top and cash at closing. And they said, yeah, every house in this market right now is getting that. And so it came back to the whole thing of, you up here until recently, you cannot make the numbers work to be able to resell the home unless there's some sentimental or added value to a property as an investment. In many cases, it's a terrible deal.
And you came in, you were smart. And I've told people about this, and me and you talked about it. Most people don't understand how to lock an interest rate because the banks never tell you you can do it. I've done it on every single house I find. I don't finance houses anymore. I haven't had a house payment for 12 years. It's the best thing known to man. I love my life this way. Not having a house payment changes your life, period. But I would always lock in because I bought during the peak once, got my ass handed to me. I learned my life lesson right there. That's why I teach the things I teach now. And even though I would have gotten my money back if I would have sat in it long enough, but it wasn't worth it. I mean, I did the math and everything. It was better to get rid of it. But you can lock in a rate, and you have usually two times where you can relock it. The banks don't tell you that. I think a lot of people are going to get caught in this one who recently purchased, and their rates are going to float up on them because they didn't lock, because the bank didn't tell them, their mortgage broker didn't tell them you can lock it now. And if it goes down, you can relock again. Right. So you locked yours way early knowing this.
Yeah. So what happened was I had given up looking at homes, and I, like you, Gary, had said, I'm just going to ride this out. I think my landlord was pretty content, even though Indiana, like other states, you could begin to evict people if they didn't pay, et cetera. He could have gotten more for the property. I think it was just worth it to him because I think he has some other. This will shock you, Gary. When you own multiple properties, some of your tenants don't value the property the way that you do.
Won't talk about tenants. I've had them.
So I don't think that was not an issue. But what happened was, because of my radio show, we always used to talk about, hey, Rob's looking for a property in Brownsburg. If you're willing to give him a hell of a deal, call him. And then eventually the person who literally lives next to my dad, which is the house I grew up in, said, we listen to you all the time. Came over to my dad, said, if Rob wants to buy a house, we're going to move to Florida and have Rob contact us, because we can probably do this without a realtor, which will save everybody a lot of money. Yeah. And then we can reduce the price of the home if Rob's willing to wait, because they weren't moving until the summer of this year. And so they said, if he's willing to wait, everybody can kind of get out okay on this. And because obviously we were locked into a good deal here, I was able to start that process. And I have a friend who's a realtor who's willing to take care of it for both of us. So my case is a little different. There's sentimental value to the location of the property. My dad is not by any means very old and, on his deathbed, but for long-term planning, to be able to look after, someone who's older. My mom lives in this town too. So literally at some point, my dad lives in a 2-story house. We live in a 1-story house. We could just flip homes at some point if that needed to happen. So there were a whole bunch of reasons that, even though the price, what would have been the list price, was still astronomically high, like we talked about in this market, being able to save money by not having to use a realtor, or having a realtor help us with the process, and then the location. And then it comes back to, I was able to lock in, even though it was a long term. I worked with a great lender who was willing to lock me in far in advance. I had to pay a little bit higher premium at the time on an estimate of what the market was going to do, but they told me, you should absolutely pay this premium, because several months from now, it's going to be astronomically higher. And it was. So if all those things had not happened, I'm 100% with you. I would not have bought a house right now.
Well, and I'm a hypocrite too, because I told people not to do that. I bought a commercial building. So, but I did it because it's the building that I do fulfillment out of, and I have for 8 years. I have a good relationship with the family. I'm good friends with them. It was the family's son and me as business partners, and his wife. We bought the building. The real estate agent we're friends with too. And so it was a deal. We got it for like $50-$60 a square foot. So it was one of it was one of those that it made sense. But again, right situation, right, good interest rate, even though the bank screwed us a little bit, but that's okay. But people, this is the mistake I always tell people with credit. And I want to dive into this cycle we're going to have to burn through, because you talk about it, I talk about it. The big mistake people
real quick, because I know you want to get off this, but real quick, if you intend to live in a home the rest of your life, up until about 3 months ago, buying a home because the interest rates were so low was not a bad investment. You could save a lot of money over renting, but that was contingent upon, like, this house I'm buying now will be one of the last 2 homes I live in my life. Either that house or the house right next door to it will be the only 2 homes I will ever live in forever and ever. But most people are not in that position. And it goes back to that home I told you about earlier, where it was, whatever it was, $225,000 plus $25,000 at closing. That was not the home I was going to die in. And so as such, you're going to have to try to sell that home within the next 10, 15 years. And there's no way you were going to make your money back. So that is one thing I would caution people on. And by the way, consult your trained real estate / investment professional on anything you hear from me, because I'm not that. It's just one guy's experience, that if you intend to live in a home for 40 years, it was, probably a good investment to get into something. But if not, no, absolutely not.
Yeah. And if you need advice, I have consulting people. That's what I do. I do this for a living.